Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Sue, and I'm here today to talk and give you a little bit of background about the myths of Hercules. Here we have a bust of the Roman Emperor Commodus dressed up in the costume of Hercules, wearing the lion head and holding the club on his shoulder. And I think he has apples of the Hesperides in his hand. So you can see that Hercules was an important figure for the Romans, and we'll be reading about him this semester. So the most popular of his stories are about the labors of Hercules. They were some of the most popular mythological narratives in antiquity, and a number of these stories show up in Hyginus's Fabulae, which is the text that we're going to be focusing on reading together in Latin 101 and 102. It's a Latin text from the 2nd century CE, and it's a kind of simple summary of a lot of different Greek myths. So, a little background about our guy, Hercules, or Heracles in the Greek. He was a son of Zeus or Jupiter and a mortal woman, Alcmene. And he had to accomplish these labors in servitude to Eurystheus, the king of Mycenae. Now, why does Hercules have to complete these labors? Well, there are a couple different reasons that were provided in different myths. The first have to do with the hatred of Hera or Juno, Jupiter's wife. She was very jealous of all of the sons who were produced by Jupiter's affairs with mortal women. So one day Jupiter was boasting that whoever was going to be born on this day was going to rule the local area. That was the day that Hercules was supposed to be born. And out of spite, Juno lengthened Alcmene's labor and helped Eurystheus to be born first. So that's one way of explaining, well, how did Eurystheus get to be powerful over Hercules? Another example of Juno's hatred we can see here in this statue. She sent twin snakes to kill Hercules in his cradle when he was just a few days old, and he grabbed them in his little baby fists and strangled them, and that was a sign of how strong and courageous he would be. Another reason why Hercules has to do the labors is that Juno sent a fit of madness upon him, and in his insanity, he murdered his wife Megara and his children. Here we have a vase of Hercules tossing one of his children on a bonfire made of furniture. And out of uh, out of penance for this terrible act, he was assigned to do the labors for Eurystheus. And then another reason, kind of hiding here, there we go, fate or virtue. Because a lot of his labors were helpful for the local community and for humankind, in some myths, he's fated to do this as a way of helping the universe. There are also myths about how he personally was virtuous and wanted to help people and worked hard in order to have a reward later. And he kind of did that out of a sense of virtue. I show you this map just to give you a sense for how broad the myths of Hercules geographically can be. His initial myths are focused mostly in mainland Greece, but as the labors go on, they tend to spiral out and go further and further from Greece. And the further away they go, kind of the more fantastic they become, and they go into realms that are kind of unknown to other humans. It covers the whole Mediterranean and even the Black Sea region. So, the labors. The first one is the labor of the Nemean lion, and this lion was very special because his skin could not be pierced by metal weapons. So Hercules had to wrestle hand to hand this lion and strangle it, and then he skinned it with his own claws. And this lion skin becomes his shield, part of his armor, and also a symbol of who he is. The second labor is the Lernaean Hydra. This was a snake with multiple heads, maybe 9 heads, and when you cut off one of them, 2 would sprout in its place. It's become a metaphor today for a complicated problem that the more you try to solve it, the worse it gets. Hercules took the venom from the snake and he dipped his arrows in it and used it whenever he shot his arrows, and it became a kind of chemical weapon that ensured that whatever touched the venom would die. The Erymanthian boar was this enormous boar that was tearing up the fields and harming farmers. So Hercules killed it and brought it back to Eurystheus. And here you can see a representation of how superior Hercules is to Eurystheus, because he can hold this boar over his head, and that is Eurystheus there, fearful and afraid and hiding in a Pythos jar. The Caronean hind was sacred to Artemis. This is a female deer. In this image, Hercules has broken off one of her horns as a sign of domination, and Hercules chased it to exhaustion and caught it. So Hercules doesn't always kill everything. In this case, he's demonstrating his endurance, this kind of superhuman endurance he has. The Stymphalian birds lived in this big swamp and were bothering people because they would shoot them with their arrows. They could use their arrows, their feathers almost like arrows. Hercules shot them and got rid of them. The stables of Algaeus is a different sort of labor. King Algaeus was very wealthy. He had enormous herds, and so he built enormous stables for them and never cleaned them. And so he had Hercules clean them out. Hercules did this by digging these enormous ditches, channels that actually redirected an entire river and swept the stables clean. The Cretan bull was this very large, scary bull who was the father of the Minotaur. Hercules captured him alive and brought him back from Crete to mainland Greece to demonstrate his strength. The mares of Diomedes were very strange and frightening creatures. They didn't eat apples or carrots. They fed only on the flesh of human beings. And so Hercules killed the horses, the king Diomedes who kept them, and the servants who fed them. The belt of Hippolyta, or another way to translate the word belt is girdle. It's an undergarment that woman wore. She was queen of the Amazons, and there are different versions of this myth. Sometimes he went to battle the Amazons and he seized her girdle by violence, and sometimes she offered it to him as a free gift because they met and she was impressed by him. The 10th labor is the labor of the cattle of Geryon, which is a story that I have thought a lot about and written about. Hercules killed Geryon, who's this triple-bodied warrior who lived in the far west beyond Spain. Hercules seized his cattle and drove them all the way across Europe to Greece, and stopped in various places along the way, including in the Forum Boarium in Rome. And this is travel that was associated with immortality because he kind of went beyond the Mediterranean world right into the Atlantic Ocean and came back. So we went beyond the known human world. The apples of the Hesperides likewise is associated because he travels far to this region that today is in Libya. And there was this garden of these nymphs called the Hesperides. He killed a kind of magical dragon that was guarding the apples and brought them back. This is a very famous statue called the Farnese Hercules. And here he doesn't look so triumphant. He doesn't look like he has the thrill of victory upon him. Instead, he looks very tired. He looks weary after his labors. He's leaning on the skin and the club, and the thing that he worked so hard for, the apples, they're kind of hidden in the back. So this is kind of a different way of thinking about and looking at Hercules. The last labor is the labor of Cerberus, who was the three-headed dog of Hades. There are, again, different variations about how Hercules overcame him, that he beat him with his club into submission, or that he offered him a delicious doggy treat and made friends with the scary three-headed dog. Regardless, he drags him up from the underworld, again, intimidating Eurystheus on this vase. And this is a literal successful return from the land of the dead, which very few heroes actually do, and a sign that Hercules has in a way, has overcome death. He went on many further adventures that pop up here and there in Hyginus. He battled a lot of different monsters. We have Antiochus the giant here on the left. He also spent a lot of time helping his friends. On the right, there's Hercules with the sword, and he is fending off Thanatos, that's death, the guy with the wings, in order to save the soul of Alcestis, who was the wife of his friend Admetus. The death of Hercules is pretty complicated. His wife Deianira was jealous because Hercules had fallen in love with a younger woman, and she painted what she thought was a love potion on a robe to send to Hercules, but it was actually the Hydra's venom. She had been tricked, and so he put on the robe, and he was touched by the venom, and he died. But as we see on the right, he was accompanied by Athenas, taken up to Olympus, where he got to enjoy life forever among the gods. And lastly, I wanted to mention that Hercules still matters for us today. These are stories that we're still interested in and we are retelling in new ways. Um, you might have grown up watching the Disney Hercules we have here in the middle, and Disney had its own spin on the Hercules story. On the left, we have still from Hercules: The Thracian Wars, which came out in 2014, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And then on the right, a little known fact, the very first film that Arnold Schwarzenegger was ever in was in Hercules in New York, which I have seen more than once and I can assure you is not a good movie. However, if you ever want to discuss, I am available. So I look forward to reading these stories with you as we get a chance to read more and more real Latin. It's very exciting and yeah, I look forward to it. Bye-bye.